the third event, and every time when I first started, I'm so nervous. So bear with me. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Peter. Were you always an entrepreneur, or how did your entrepreneurship journey start?
Yeah, it's my father's fault. My dad worked for IBM for 25 years, and I was an IBM brat. So, back then, I think they said that every single airplane in the air everywhere in the world had someone that worked for IBM on the plane, and so they traveled people. They moved people around a lot. So that's kind of the way I grew up, and I didn't want to do that at all. So I think it was a rebellion in a way. I started my first company when I was 17 in high school because I wanted to live in Maine. I grew up in New York, and I wanted to live in Maine for the summer. And my parents said, "There's no way you can live in Maine unless you can find yourself a job." And I'm like, "Well, who's going to hire me in Maine? I don't know anybody in Maine." And so I started a house painting business, and then actually I had that business all the way through college. I'd like to say it helped me pay for college, but I think my parents were still responsible for the tuition part. Yeah.
So when did you? So that was your first venture.
Yeah.
What was your first venture? What did you do?
That was it. It was a house painting business and a property management business. We catered to the summer houses. This is it was a summer destination. So it was a very small fishing village. There were only about 500 people lived there all the time. But it swelled in the summer, and I figured that the summer people didn't know any local people to take care of their houses, and no one local would hire me to take care of their house. So that was the way I marketed it to them, and it worked out. It worked out pretty well, and I think that it probably gave me, sort of the biggest appetite for being an entrepreneur. Even though all the other businesses I've been in there have been, in some sense they've been easier than that business, but that definitely gave me a taste for being my own boss. That's for sure. Yeah.
And how did your journey with Coinstar start?
Yeah, so all of my entrepreneurial ventures started with me not having a job. So being unemployed or wanting to be somewhere because of a girl and needing a job in order to be in that place. So that's how I ended up in New York. Was I wanted to move to New York because of a girl, and I didn't have a job there, so I started a software company. And that was in the 90s, and luckily that worked out. The company worked out, and the girl worked out too. This is my wife now, and we sold the company in 2000 and moved to Seattle, where my wife is from. And in fact, we sold the company in August. Well, my son was born in August 2000. He went to college this year, and then we sold the company. We closed the deal in September, and we moved to Seattle in October of 2000. It was like bang, bang, bang. And most of you probably don't remember, but that was a really tough time in 2000. It was April 24th, 2000 is the day that the internet bubble burst, the first internet bubble. If we had more time, I can explain to you how I know it's that day exactly. And everything that happened after that was really hard for a couple of years. So I moved to Seattle thinking that I was going to be this big shot from New York with all this experience, and I was going to go to this small town on the Northwest, and everyone was going to hire me to, because I'd already had this, experience working in private equity and then working as an entrepreneur, and nobody wanted to hire me for anything because all the companies were going out of business, and so that again, I had no real choice but to start another business. So I started a business that wasn't successful, but during that time, I met some of the founders of Coinstar, and it was founded by a local guy from Seattle while he was in business school at Stanford. And I actually met him at a soccer game, and we were in the same soccer league, and I gave him some advice about what he should do with the business because they were trying to figure out what else to do besides this coin counting machine. And about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later, he called me, and actually no, he didn't call me. I ran into him again at another soccer game, and he said, "Wait, we're going to implement that advice that you gave me, and we'd like you to come in and interview for that job." So that's one bit of advice that's worked really well for me, is don't underestimate the karmic aspect your career, like the cosmic aspect of it, because I think for me, most of the good things that happened in my career happened because of something like that, where it was kind of a pay it forward thing, and then later it turned out that it paid back. I've never actually gotten a job by making a resume and a cover letter and sending it out and having someone call me for an interview. No one's ever called me for an interview before. It's never worked. All of my jobs have come because of something like that, some sort of, like you might meet someone here that ends up being your co-founder in the next company that you start, and I really think that's the way it works. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had a business that failed. How many
Yeah.
other businesses failed, and why did they fail?
We don't have time to talk about all. I mean,
Maybe one of them?
every business, like I would say, 9 out of the 10 things, maybe even 19 out of 20 things that I've done have been a complete failure or a pretty impressive failure, and that includes the almost 10 years that I was at Coinstar, where I was my job was to start businesses for this company, and it could be that because I was doing it for a company that was already fairly well established, that the downside wasn't as great, so it was easier to fail. But the consequences were bigger too, because we were a publicly traded company, and a lot of my projects caused the stock to tank or caused the stock to go up a lot, and there was a lot of concern about that. So whenever I showed up at a board meeting to make a presentation, all the board members just roll, like, oh God, what is he going to bring to us next? And because they're all bankers, very conservative, and they just wanted to, they wanted the stock to sort of stay the same and maybe go up steadily, but not go all over the place. Definitely not go down. And so I can't give you an answer. I think we did about 20 or 30 acquisitions while I was there. We started just as many businesses. The only one that anyone remembers that I was involved in is Redbox, because it got so big over 5 years. And that's the nice thing for me, is that in Seattle, I'm the Redbox guy, but they don't remember all of the other things that were miserable failures, including one which was $300 million of shareholder money that we spent, and it resulted in nothing. I mean, it was just gone completely, and they don't remember it.
Yeah.
What was it?
It was a vending. So what we tried to do with Coinstar, if you've been in a grocery store, which you probably have, like Safeway, you see the Coinstar machine there, and you often see the Redbox machine sitting right next to it. And back in the mid 2000s, we had a whole myriad kiosks there. We had one that was a self-service. We were trying to basically disintermediate Starbucks by having a coffee kiosk, self-service, espresso kiosk, and we had an electronic payment kiosk that sold gift cards, and you could top up your prepaid wireless phone at another kiosk. And so that we were doing all that. So we got this idea that our service people could come into the store and take care of all those machines, and we kept seeing this. The crane, I'm sort of embarrassed by the story, but the crane machine, the claw machine? Well, so that's in every grocery store, or used to be. It's not now, but it used to be in the front of every grocery store. And we kept seeing these techs come in and take care of these machines, and we thought, well, maybe if we were in that business, we could take care of that one too. And the key strategic move for us is that we were trying to get into Walmart, and we didn't have Walmart as a customer, but they had all those kiosks. So we bought the company that took care of all those kiosks in Walmart. And then because we bought that company, we eventually got our Coinstar machine in there. And then when we did the Redbox deal, we got the Redbox machine in there. And that was a huge achievement for us. And that the Walmart business for Redbox by itself was $200 million a year. And so for me, we invested $300 million in this crane business that completely fell apart. It was the worst deal that I've ever been involved in. It just, every month, it just got worse and worse and worse. It really was terrible. And then, but on the other hand, if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have gotten Walmart, and probably Redbox wouldn't have grown as quickly, and I probably wouldn't be living in Hawaii. So, I mean, I guess there's some good things to happen even from failure. That's the long-winded story. Yeah.
Where did the idea for Redbox come from?
So there's two guys in New York that I knew from when I was working in private equity that were entrepreneurs. The DVD kiosk concept had been in Europe for years. There were thousands of these kiosks around in Europe. And they got the idea of bringing it to the United States. And I met them, and I got the idea of putting it in grocery stores. And around the same time, another guy that I knew who was a venture capitalist had gone to work for McDonald's. And McDonald's was placing kiosks for a brief period of time. They were trying out different kiosk concepts. And actually, this guy had been one of the pre-IPO founders of Netflix. His family owned a chain of movie stores. And so he was trying out different self-service concepts, including they had a self-service convenience store. So everything except for beer and cigarettes, they would sell in a kiosk. And it turns out that convenience stores make money on beer and cigarettes, so that was a bad idea. But they were also testing this kiosk, and it was, to show how creative we were, it was red. The box was red. That the one machine they had in Adams Morgan, a neighborhood in DC, the machine they tested, it was red. That's where the name came from. That's the only reason it was called Redbox, because when we referred to it, we said the red box. We were talking about that one box because the convenience store was terrible. So, trying to figure out a way to make this story short. So the guys that came up with it in New York were called DVD Express, and we invested in them, and we helped them install their first machines, which were here in Hawaii in Foodland.
Wow.
And then at the same time, I was talking to Mitch and Greg, who were at McDonald's trying to make this work, and McDonald's didn't want to do it. They wanted to get rid of it. And so I came up with the idea of putting those two efforts together. So in 2005, we spun Redbox out of McDonald's, and we combined it with DVD Express, and we called it Redbox. It was called Redbox Automated Retail, because we wanted to keep doing automation of retail concepts. So that's kind of what Coinstar's bread and butter was. So in 2005, the combined business had basically no revenue and $5 million in losses. And the board was so unhappy with me for doing this. And then, in fact, one board member told me that he was going to vote no against the investment, but I guess it was a backhanded compliment, because he said, I know you're very persuasive and you will convince the board to vote for this, but I'm going to vote no. And I didn't know that, with public companies, the boards always want to do everything unanimously, because if there's a dissenting vote and shareholders sue or something like that, it looks really bad. I didn't know that. So, but he ended up coming around, and he did it as well. He voted for it. And then in just a couple years, I guess it said in the bio, like within 5 years, it was $1.3 billion in revenue. And it was interesting because the CEO of Redbox, a guy named Greg Kaplan, he told me the reason that McDonald's didn't want to be in the business is because if it couldn't be a $1 billion business within 5 years, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Because they could put a new salad or sandwich on the menu and get $1 billion within a year or two. And Greg is a very bookish person, and he had gone and figured out that there were only a small number of companies that had ever gone from zero to $1 billion in 5 years. How many do you think there were? Like, what's your guess? This is 2005.
5?
Yeah, there were 5, less than 5. It was amazing it seems like these companies, just come from nowhere, but nobody pays attention to the first 5 struggling years where they're just trying to be something. They only see the next 5 years when they're on the growth path. Yeah. So I don't think that was your question, but that was my
That was
story.
perfect.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about Hawaii.
Okay.
What brought you to Hawaii?
I was trying to win a competition to be the world's most supportive husband. My wife, she wanted to go to so I left Coinstar, but this is another important thing I think you should think about in your career. Like, that Kenny Rogers song, like The Gambler, no one to hold them, no one to walk away. Okay, so everybody individually has a certain amount of leverage in the organizations they're in. And the leverage meaning like power, and that leverage can go up and it can go down, but it never stays the same. And so in 2011, around then, I realized that because what what I'd helped create in Redbox had become so important that I had more leverage than I was ever going to have in that company. But it was going to go away because we were hiring so many people. We were bringing hundreds of people in a month. And there were we hired the CFO from JetBlue to be our CFO. And we hired the former VP of marketing from Starbucks to be, the VP of marketing. Like, these people are way, way above my pay grade, So I just timed it perfectly and said, you know what, I'm out of here. And everyone was like, what, are you crazy? And so I left, and that worked out really well. We moved to Spain. We lived in Barcelona for a year. My plan was to burn all the bridges I had with the corporate experience, so I would never have to do that again, because I really liked working as an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurship exists in big companies, but it's a very different thing. And we grew so fast that I was spending a lot of time going to meetings, discussing meetings like other meetings, and not building anything anymore. And so I thought I'd leave, and then I'd come back and do something entrepreneurial. So when I came back from Spain, we lived back in Seattle for a few years, and my wife wanted to go to grad school. And so I suggested that she look outside of Seattle. She'd grown up there, and I'd been there for almost 15 years, except for the year we lived in Europe. And so she picked Hawaii to go to grad school. She went to Chaminade, got her master's in psychology. And actually, it was funny because when she said that she wanted to go there, let's see, is anyone from the Midwest here? Yeah, from Cleveland? Okay. All right, you said that before. Okay, then I can use Cleveland. I said to her, when I told you I could live anywhere for 3 years, I thought you were going to pick, Cleveland or something like that. And she picked Honolulu, and that sounds awesome. So that's how we ended up here.
And how did you get in? You could have been retired. Why did you decide to help the entrepreneurship?
Well, I don't know. Retirement is a stupid thing to do. I don't know why anyone would do that. It's so boring. And, I don't play golf, and I already read a lot. I play the guitar. I got plenty of time for myself, but it's, there's a lot of daylight, and you got to do something. So I was working with entrepreneurs in Seattle a little bit, but in Seattle, it's a bigger market, and there's a lot of people like me in Seattle. A lot of people that have experience similar to mine and want to help entrepreneurs. So I was undifferentiated there, But when I came here, and I was willing to help, because I had 3 kids to go to school. My wife was in school, so we had 4 people in school and me. We were living up on Tantalus, and I didn't have anything to do except look at the view. So I met Omar and Tarek Sultan. I met Susan Yamada, who used to have my job, and I said, I'm here to help, and they found things for me to do. And I was lucky because I was at a point where I wasn't looking for a job. It wasn't essential that I had a job, and that, it's hard to come to Hawaii and without a job. I mean, so I've really felt fortunate that at least for the first 3 years, I can do this. I can put the kids in private school and my wife in school, and we can figure that out. But I had a pretty high burn rate, while I was here. So I eventually thought, well, maybe I should do some work that actually pays. So I started teaching at UH, which had become a fantasy of mine, was to reinvent myself as an academic. And that's still a work in progress, kind of. And then I, had a great time helping the Sultans launch Accelerate UH, and I was involved in all 5 cohorts of those companies, and I'm still involved in a number of them. I'm an investor in a bunch of them. There's a few that are out of business now that I'm an investor in, sadly, but or was. But I found that the community here was just like happy to have me come and help, and I was happy to help. So
do you believe that Hawaii is a good place to start a startup?
Yeah, I think Hawaii is an amazing place to start a company. I think there's some misunderstanding about what the elements of a good ecosystem are for entrepreneurship. We always complain about how it's the most expensive place to live, and it's the worst place to do business, and so forth. But when you look at the some of the key criteria, when you compare it to, say, California or New York or Massachusetts, these are also really terrible places to do business. I mean, they're very high on the list. I mean, very close to Hawaii. They're very expensive. Cost of living is really high. There's a very onerous regulatory environment. There's a ton of competition. I mean, there's all sorts of similarities. So I think it's a real myth to think that, you know, like, it's hard here, and that therefore we should go to California, or we should go to Washington, or we should go to, you know, New York or Massachusetts. Particularly if it's a digital business, the geography does not matter at all, you know. And sadly, we've lost a lot of entrepreneurs, even in the 5 years I've been here. We've lost a lot of entrepreneurs to the mainland, and they're almost always going for the wrong reason. They're going because they think that money grows on trees in Silicon Valley, which it doesn't. There's, you know, there's more money there, but there's more people, like, trying to pick the fruit off the trees too. So there's a lot more competition. And then sometimes they go there because they want to be closer to customers, and I don't think that really makes that much sense either in the digital age. And yeah, and then some go for legitimate reasons, you know, whatever, they're from there, or they have family there, or maybe an investor forces them to move there, I guess. But
What do you think should happen for Hawaii to have one big unicorn, one big company that stays and brings more talent in? Or where do you see Hawaii be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I don't make predictions because I'm terrible at it. If you haven't noticed from my background, my strategy with predictions is not to predict one thing, but, you know, to predict 30 different outcomes, and then 29 of them will not come true, and hopefully one of them will. And I think that's the strategy that we need to use here. Is we need to be very supportive of all sorts of entrepreneurship at all levels: product companies and software companies, and, you know, tech companies, and low tech, high tech, and low tech. And some of these companies are going to be successful, and then they have to make the decision to stay here. And you know, Seattle had Microsoft. Before that, they had Boeing. Boeing was literally like the only employer in Seattle. There's stories from my wife's family about when Boeing was doing so poorly, someone actually paid and put a billboard up on I-90 driving east that said, the last person to leave Seattle, please turn off the lights, because it was so dependent on Boeing. But then Microsoft came and built up a whole ecosystem. People learned how to be in the tech business. They left, they started companies. Then Amazon came. So you need kind of the anchor tenants around the ecosystem to work. Vancouver has had a renaissance because of Hootsuite. And the founders of Hootsuite, they said, this is where we're going to build the company. The VCs said, you need to move to Silicon Valley. They're like, no, we're not going to. We're going to do it. If you don't like us here, you know, we're not going to take your money. And I think that's what Hawaii needs. They need that anchor success story. But that only happens if, you know, people are trying to be that success story, you know. I don't think government intervention or government funding, I don't think there's any shortage of venture capital here. Money follows deals in my personal experience. So if you have a good deal, you're going to get funded. And it doesn't matter whether they're, you know, where you are, like the Hootsuite story. San Diego is the same way. You know, actually a company that I was involved in starting when I was at Coinstar called EcoATM. That we gave them their first, you know, $1 million of seed capital. It was like a corporate venture capital thing. And, you know, they ended up selling the company for $300 million and spun off a whole startup ecosystem because that one deal. Yeah.
So what do you think is UH's plan or role into building better entrepreneurs or more entrepreneurs and guide them to stay and, as a founder, make that decision of, I want to build my company?
Yeah, UH. Yeah. Well, first, I think that, you know, universities play a really important role in innovation in any ecosystem. So any of the strong ones, you know, you have Stanford and Berkeley and others in the California area. You have University of Washington, and, you know, where I spent a lot of time, and Israel is a great example of you know, technology commercialization out of universities is what made Israel a a tech mecca. And so I think the role is really important. I think there's some problems too in that, the university, I don't know if any of my bosses are here, geez, I hope not. But, I think it doesn't necessarily come naturally for the university as a bureaucracy to be involved with startups and to be, they're pretty good at getting massive amounts of federal funding to come in to do research, to do hard research, and they're terrible at converting that research into some sort of commercial ventures. We're really working hard at it. I mean, that's one of the main things that we're trying to do at PACE is tease out all the technologies that exist in labs and in departments all over the university system, and convince these people to team up with entrepreneurs. And so I think UH plays a really important role, and they can always do more, I guess. Yeah.
What do you think is one specific thing that everyone in the audience can do to help build this startup ecosystem in Hawaii?
Well, how many people are involved in a startup right now? Yeah, so a lot. Yeah, I mean, you're already doing it, and I think I was at a meeting this morning. I was late for it, but I was at part of it for the Hawaii Business Roundtable. So it was like this many people that all work for the biggest companies in Hawaii, and none of them would have raised their hands. I mean, they're not involved at all, and they're not even involved in supporting you all as startups. So I think that's the bigger question: is what can the big companies do to help you all, and to they can be your first customer, or they can be your joint venture partner, or they, if you're far enough along and they see that you fit in their strategy, they could invest in you or acquire you, and that has to happen as well. And it's not completely missing from Hawaii, but it's not as vibrant here as what I saw in Seattle. I mean, I have friends that worked for Microsoft 4 times. They went there for their first job. They left and started a company. They got acquired by Microsoft. They worked for a while. They left and started a company, and that's the pattern. And Microsoft is super open to that, and so is Amazon. And I think that has to be the attitude of and frankly, so is Starbucks, so is Boeing. They're seeding the entrepreneurial community, and in doing that, they're advancing their own long-term strategy. And I don't know, something about the economy here, and maybe the nature of the businesses, the big businesses here, they're not involved with us. I mean, you probably know this already. I go to all the entrepreneurial events I have the energy to, and I never see anybody from the big companies in Hawaii. There's, unless they're the corporate sponsor, and which probably means that, I or somebody persuaded them to give us the money to run the event, so they have to show up. But they're not involved, not so much. So maybe that's missing here. And to be fair, that meeting this morning was about that. That was the role. The purpose of that meeting was to kind of punch some people in the face. It's like, hit them in the head with a 2x4. Like, wake up! You got to do something. And so I think they will come around. Yeah.
Any general advice you would give people who are thinking about starting out, or people? Looks like the majority of people are involved in startups. What advice will you give them to thrive?
I only have one thing that I always say is, like, people say, "Oh, I have this idea." I always say, "Do it. Just do it," because working for a big company, it sucks. And you think that if you work for a big company and you think you're in a safe job because you're pulling a paycheck, you're just deluding yourself. You're going to get fired. I promise you're going to get fired. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. I did 20 plus acquisitions at Coinstar, and that almost every acquisition we did involved synergy. You know what synergy is? That's you all getting fired. That's what that means. And I was delighted about it. I'd look at it, it's like, wow, there's $30 million of synergy here, because I counted how many people we don't need anymore because we have a CFO and they have a CFO, and we have a marketing department and they have a marketing department. At that level, corporations are pretty pretty ugly and objective, and they're not your friends. So there's definitely this myth that says that going and getting a job as an accountant in a big firm, like that's the safe thing to do. It's not. It's not the safe thing to do. The safe thing to do is to go start your own business and build something of real value and be your own boss. Now, I can tell you a million ways how you can get fired from your own startup. It's happened to me before, so I know for sure that it can. But at least you're building your own thing of value. You're not building it for someone else. Yeah.
Are there any trends in startup ecosystem that worries you, or anything that is encouraging in general?
There's a lot that worries me, and I'm not wild about predictions, because usually the things that worry me, often they end up being the biggest thing. I just completely missed it. I mean, I thought like social media, that's stupid. Like, why would people do that? I'm not kidding. And but some things come around again too. All of these delivery businesses that are massive now. I mean, we did all that in the 90s. The Cosmo.com, look it up. It's a Harvard Business case study. And all of these businesses that are really hot now, they all happened 20 years ago, and they were miserable failures. So that worries me, but it also makes me think that I misunderstand something about timing, and that sometimes bad ideas from before might end up being good ideas in the future at some point, and vice versa, I guess.
Was there any technology that changed your habits or the way you do things?
I guess everything. Yeah, I guess everything. I mean, the internet, I don't know. I mean, you think about all the businesses that are layered on the technology breakthroughs from the last 20 years. Like those are the things that I really regret missing. Like the smartphone comes along, and it makes way for all of these amazing businesses that wouldn't exist without the smartphone. Like, why can't I think of that? Why can't I think in the future that way? I think I've really been short-sighted that way. But there's some things about technology I don't like. I think it's a shame that with all of this data and all this, machine learning and the predictive analytics, that the best thing it can do is basically try to sell me a product that I already just bought, or try to sell me a book by the author that I just bought, or try to sell me another Toyota Highlander because I bought a Toyota Highlander in the past. That's pretty disappointing. That's all that's come out of it so far. So, and I know there's more to it than that, but I try not to be a complete technology Luddite about things like this, but I do wonder how technology will affect my kids, for example. They go to a school where they all have iPads, and my youngest daughter is going to get her first iPhone. She's finally in 6th grade, so that was our rule for some reason, and that changes everything for them. I saw what it did to the other kids, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's just different. I got to get used to it,
So I have a few more questions, and then we're going to move to a 21-question rapid fire.
I don't do rapid fire. You've heard my answers, right? They're all really long-winded.
So let's see. When it comes to investing, what do you look for in a company?
So I don't really have a good answer for that. Gut feel has not worked out for me at all. Although there's some research that I've read that gut feel ends up being a pretty powerful thing that angel investors use. The team is, people always say that, oh, we invest in teams. I don't know. The team is really unpredictable. I mean, business would be really easy if it weren't for all the people. It's like with competing priorities, yeah, and everybody's interests change. I acquired a company once where the founder of the company, it was he and his wife. They were co-founders, and I think Stefan heard the story. But he came to me and he said that he'd only sign the deal if I agreed after the transaction closed to fire his wife. And he said that the business was ruining their marriage. And I can't fix that for you, man, you know. But like, people are very complicated. So I don't know about the team thing. So those are things that I've invested in companies because of the team, or because of a gut feeling, or because everyone else was. I got kind of drug along, you know, the herd mentality, that's happened before. And I would say that if I was smart, I would probably, and I already told you that I'm not very good at predicting things, but I would probably invest in markets. Like I would invest in businesses that were in markets that were probably either destined to be enormous or that were growing really fast, because, you know, the growth of a market, it covers a lot of mistakes that people make. Growth covers a lot of mistakes. I mean, Redbox was growing so fast, we did so many stupid things, and it didn't matter because we were just growing like crazy and covering them. We were just fixing them all behind the scenes, you know. And so I think if you bet on the, you know, the market being bigger, then it's more likely that the horse you bet on would end up, you know, finishing the race, I guess. So.
You answered my next question, which was, what's the most important when evaluating a startup, team, idea, or market? That's Stefan's question, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I should have figured that. Yeah. Team, idea, market. Actually, that's not right. Sorry.
Okay.
The most important thing, in my opinion, is timing. To what I said before. And there's a guy named Bill Gross who founded Idea Labs. Idea Labs is probably the very first real accelerator before Y Combinator and everything else. You know, the core technology that Google Search uses was invented at Idea Lab. It was called GoToNet. And, you know, he looked at, I don't know, the hundreds of deals that they invested in, and that's what he said. He said timing was way more important than team, market, product, anything else. But the other thing that I would say, that I know this is what wins our business plan competition every year, but I think it's a sign that businesses are going to be successful, is the degree to which they focus on traction. So, you know, if you want to start a business and you want investors, don't create a wonderful PowerPoint presentation and go pitch investors. Create a great product and go get a customer. You know, that's traction, and the money will follow that stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I have been angel investing since, I guess, really since, you know, early 2000s, but much more actively in Hawaii, and you know, it hasn't really penciled out all that well for me, honestly. So, but it's a long game as well. Hopefully, maybe before my youngest daughter finishes college or something, you know. But. And then you also have to remember that when you're making investments, Steve Homschild, who founded Lanikai Brewery, he said this, and this meant so much to me. I almost like repurposed all my investing strategy. He's like, you don't forget to invest in yourself. So when you're making the choice to take, you know, to give money to another founder, you shouldn't be thinking about it, well, should I invest in that startup or that startup or that startup? You should probably be thinking about, should I invest in them or invest in myself and what I want to do. And I think I've gotten a better payback off of the businesses that I've started myself, for sure, than the ones that I've, you know, where I've bet on somebody else. Because I'm not you. Like, I can't get inside your head and know what you really want to do or what you're capable of doing, and you can't do that with me either. If I could, we wouldn't be talking here.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so you guys ready for 21 question rapid fire?
Yeah. Bring it on.
Okay.
It's terrifying.
All right. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Yes.
Beer or wine?
Beer, but when I lived in Seattle, it was wine, but it's too hot here for wine. Red wine. I don't like white wine. Red wine, you know, it's like always, it's always perfect temperature for wine in Seattle. Yeah.
Was it beer or wine?
It was wine. Now it's beer.
Sushi or tacos?
Sushi, definitely.
Favorite app? Favorite app?
Oh, the Barca, FC Barca app.
Oh, nice. That makes me
Either
very
that or
happy.
maybe the MLS app. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were a soccer fan.
I lived in Barcelona, man.
Louder.
Okay. The FC Barca app. That's my favorite app.
It's a soccer team. Favorite OS?
Omar Sultan?
Operating system.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a Mac person now. Yeah. Converted Mac person. Yeah.
Favorite holiday?
Halloween.
Favorite car?
I don't have a car, and I don't like cars. I don't really care about them at all. But I used to care about Jeep CJ7. I had a 1985 red, fire engine red Jeep CJ7. It was the last year that American Motors made the Jeep, and that's the only car I ever wanted when I was younger. And then I got it. I was like, it's all downhill from here. It's all I ever wanted was this car, and I don't have that one anymore. But yeah, I don't. Sorry, rapid fire. Go ahead.
Favorite vacation spot?
Maine or Jackson Hole. It's a toss-up. Winter in Jackson Hole, summer in Maine.
Favorite book?
That's pretty easy. That's 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez and The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. There's a few more, but go ahead.
Favorite movie or TV show?
My favorite movie is, there's a lot, but Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. Yeah, I used to have a ferret in college that his name was Cool Hand Luke. Yeah. A ferret, yeah. It's not a good thing to have when you're in college. Like it's not, yeah.
How many hard-boiled eggs can you eat?
Yeah, I never tried that, but yeah.
Favorite artist or musician?
My favorite, that's super hard. My favorite song is Sweet Thing by Van Morrison, but it's not the Van Morrison version, it's the Waterboys cover of that song. But that's not my favorite musician. My favorite musician is probably the Grateful Dead. That's all I'll say. I'll go with that. Yeah.
Your go-to karaoke song?
Don't have one.
Anything you collect?
Debt. Regrets.
Any unusual skills or talents?
No, not really. Don't think so. I'm a classical guitar player, but that's not I wouldn't say that's a talent or an unusual skill. But I speak Russian. Yeah.
Your top strength in business?
Perseverance.
What was your first job?
I had to get up at like 5 in the morning and roll out the clay courts at the local tennis court for like $2 an hour, I think. It was terrible. It was a terrible job.
I've done that.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Soccer coach. But not like, I've already been my kid's soccer coach. I'm talking about, serious.
Pep Guardiola.
Like Pep Guardiola, right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe an MLS team. I'd be okay with an MLS team. Yeah.
What is the best compliment someone can give you?
The best compliment that someone can give me or that someone gave me before?
That someone can give you or gave you. You choose.
You're weird. You're unusual. You're not like everybody else. Yeah, yeah. I have a pathological problem with being compared to everyone else, like being just like everyone else. It's a fight I have with my wife. Like if she said something like, "Oh, it's just like you. You're a man," like, that makes me so upset. So I'm not like anyone else.
A cause you're passionate about?
Entrepreneurs. Yeah, that would probably be the main one. I told Shinoa Farnsworth once that I thought my my activity should be called Philanthropreneurship. Get it? Yeah.
Who are 5 people, alive or dead, you would want to have dinner with?
Did you take these from the New York Times Magazine?
Another director sent me this, so I'm just borrowing this.
5 people alive or dead. How about, let's see, Neil Armstrong? Rapid fire. Joseph Stalin. Not that I admire him, I was a Russian history major and I thought, he's pretty horrible. It would be interesting to talk to him. I did have a professor that was a translator for Stalin and Hitler, and I shook his hand once, and I remember thinking that I was shaking the hand that shook the hand of Hitler and Stalin. I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's 2, right? Alive or dead? I don't know. I'm not that much of a like a fanboy type of person. I really do admire what other people have accomplished, but I kind of want to like soak it in without talking to them and asking them what they did. I'm sorry. It's just.
How about Pep Guardiola?
I'm mad at Pep. He was a big fan. I would have put him on the list definitely, but then he was a real jackass at the MLS All-Star game when he was coaching Bayern Munich after Germany won the World Cup, and he was just a jerk, and he seems like a jerk ever since then. Yeah. So.
One thing on your bucket list.
I don't really have a bucket list. I don't have a bucket list. Yeah. I'd like to live in Europe again. That was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And if I had the opportunity to go and move back to Barcelona, I would go tomorrow. Absolutely. That was a wonderful experience. And but then again, I'd want my kids to be with me and that age again. It was so fun. That'd be hard. Can't time travel.
So let's open it up for questions. Just be mindful. We have 15 minutes.
You calling them or?
You call them.
Go ahead.
Want a pro soccer team?
Pardon?
Want own a pro soccer team?
No, I want to be the coach.
But if you have the opportunity, you'd like to own a pro soccer team here in Hawaii. We'll talk later.
We can talk about that. Yeah. It's a big enough market. I mean, yeah, could be.
Market research, I know.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. Would I have to give up my Sounders season tickets? I still have Sounders.
NPSL, different.
Okay.
But we could probably kick the Sounders' butt.
No. Go ahead.
You were mentioning kind of like wondering why people move to the mainland. One of the things that I've heard is access to talent. Do you think access to talent is a big restriction here in life?
Well, so there isn't enough technical talent here. There's a ton of talent, but there aren't enough engineers here. And I figured this out mathematically. I was talking to a friend of mine in Seattle who's an angel investor, and I was saying what we were working on here, and I was like, what advice would you give me? And he said, how many computer science grads does UH graduate every year? And I said, I don't know. And this was 2015. He said, UW graduates 300 a year, and they're doubling the size. It's doubling to 600. And then Microsoft is doing a partnership with a Chinese university to produce another 500, and then so and so. So they were graduating undergraduates like 1,000 plus a year. And I dug around and I found out that the answer at UH was 30. And if you think about it, the greater Seattle area is 4.5 million people. And so there's 1 million people on Oahu. So it's not that much, it's smaller, but it's not that much smaller. It shouldn't be 100 times, it shouldn't. And so I think there's a shortage of that. And we've tried, that's one of the things at PACE that we really try to work on is, inserting the entrepreneurial mindset in the technical colleges, not just at the business school, and being super supportive of the engineering folks that are up and coming and getting them to be entrepreneurs. And I think it's working. The engineers swept our two big competitions, the Breakthrough Innovation Challenge and the venture competition, or the business plan competition. We just changed the name. But last year, they swept it. They were all the finalists were engineers. So, but I think we need more. I think that's missing. So I don't think there's any other talent missing though here. I think it's literally just, and there's some great technical talent. It's just there doesn't seem to be enough. So one other thing about that, sorry. You know, Amazon, when they were looking for they'd had that whole fiasco looking for the second headquarters, and the New York Times had an article with a map of the United States and all the possible locations. It didn't even have Hawaii on the map. I mean, I don't mean like it wasn't a dot on the map as a possible location. I mean, the state wasn't even on the map. You know, they just left it off completely. And Anna Hrushka from Pacific Business News asked me why I thought Hawaii wasn't being considered for that, and I think that's the reason, is that they need technical talent, and there weren't enough to feed that. So I think that's important, yeah. And there's some great organizations here like DevLeague and others that are doing really good work and making more of them, and we just need to support them and, you know, make more of them, yeah.
I think also like logistics, shipping, supplies in. So if you're in a manufacturer, logistics
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like a lot of stuff can't actually fly on a plane.
But-
Or
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to be a manufacturer with your manufacturing operation based here. There's no reason. I mean, it's not the world we live in anymore. And you're right, it doesn't work, but you shouldn't have to. You know, you shouldn't have to set up manufacturing here. I mean, there's probably very few instances where there's something truly unique that, you know, is an ingredient or something for some product in Hawaii where you need to do it here. But yeah.
We have a question there.
How important or how much of a hindrance can it be to have a startup something that you really believe in as far as a cause without so much concern about how profitable it will be, but you have a passion for it and think it's a good,
Yeah,
cause?
do it. I mean, that's what I would say. Do it. The one thing I'd make sure, so nonprofits or causes have the same problem that for-profit companies have. They have to solve a real problem. You know, there has to be, so it's not enough for the founder of either form to be passionate. There has to be other people that are passionate for it, you know, because if there aren't, there's no real market. And I've seen a lot of nonprofits that are really trying to do good, but they're not really solving effectively a big enough problem to make it work. Yeah. So I would approach a nonprofit, I think, the same way as a for-profit, and that is wild speculation on my part because I have almost no experience in the nonprofit sector except for all of my startup investments. They're not profits, not profit. Yeah, could be.
Any other questions?
What do you
Yeah.
think about using remote teams for your tech?
I feel like I was the very first telecommuter. I mean, you know, I mastered this, particularly when I was at Coinstar. I had to travel so much. I mastered this idea that, you know, if you don't care where I am when I'm working, I don't care when I have to work. And I think that's a great thing about technology that has done, is enabled remote work. And I think it's crazy that businesses, even tech companies, still have these strong gravitational centers. It seems so wasteful when you could have a distributed workforce. And there's some, I mean, that's getting increasingly popular, is the distributed workforce. I don't know why you have to show up in the same place every day and see the same people. I think it might even be counterproductive, you know, because people get used to it. You see the pace. Remember at Coinstar, I would watch this guy in the cube next to me get up and go over to like the coffee room, and a lot of times he had PJs on. He was a developer, so that's kind of okay. But the pace that he walked from, I kind I kind of run everywhere. I, like just very enthusiastic, bouncing around. I don't drink coffee anymore, but that used to help. But the pace that he walked to me indicated that he's just like making the clock go by, And I think that happens when you try to force people all to work in this relatively unnatural environment, doing something. Most people are doing something that isn't that fun in their organization, particularly if they're bigger. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Did I cut you off?
No. I thought you had your hand up. Yeah.
I guess 2 questions, somewhat related. One is, what are your favorite information inputs, just to get your sense of the world and what's going on? And the second question is, do you have any favorite sort of macroeconomic trends? What are you following, or what do you think is worth following? Although I know you're not in the business of predictions.
I would be if I was good at it. I'm just not, because I'm terrible. I've already told you my past prediction about social media. So information inputs. I used to read only 3 periodicals, I guess. I read the Sunday New York Times cover to cover. I read National Geographic cover to cover, and I read the New Yorker magazine cover to cover. And I still do New Yorker and National Geographic, but I'm almost giving up on the New Yorker because everything is an editorial now. All those great sources of news that I really relied on my whole life, it's just an editorial, and it's very discouraging. And so, yeah, you all need to come up with a way to really verify and validate the information inputs, as you call them, because it's hard to tell what's what these days. And I think that's one of the problems with the information age that we're living right now. So I don't think I have a go-to. Actually, lately, even Axios, the newsletter Axios, if you read that, I loved that for a while, but they're advertising for Juul, and it's a PR campaign basically, sort of that says like Juul's not for kids, really, that's what you're doing? So everybody gets corrupted, I guess. I discovered a new one, which is more like long form, called Aeon. That's a wonderful one. I mean, I wish I had the time to read every single article every single morning. There's 3 articles that are like readers' choices. They're all amazing, but you gotta be interested in philosophy and things like that. But that's a good one.
Thank you so much. So